Stephen Demon said. Politics, and specifically one's perception of political arguments. Just because I say socialism has been tried too many times and failed almost all of the time doesn't immediately mean I do not recognize that X country's implementation of capitalism has been done right. Cough cough America cough cough. I am simply saying that screaming socialism at the top of your lungs without any guidance or plan is a half-assed approach to a complex problem. Just an example, but I feel it drives my point. Naaman is said. Sheikh al-Islam. I heard of this guy after hearing someone on TV complain about how this man set the Islamic world back by centuries. In 1515, the age of the Ottoman Empire, he, a learned scholar of the kingdom, issued a decree that forbid printing, press, and made using it punishable by death. Edit, grammar, more context. Sula Jabri said. Wiki, in the year 1515, Sheikh al-Islam of the Ulama, learned scholars, issued a fatwa that printing was haram, forbidden. As a result, Ottoman Sultan Selim I issued a decree of a death penalty on anyone using the printing press. The fatwa has been attributed as one of the reasons for the stagnation of knowledge, invention and discovery in the Muslim world, at a time when Europe was in the midst of the Renaissance period. It seems that Sheikh al-Islam is a title though, not a name. Ben Burka said. Oh, the fall of my country's history. Yes, and other great examples I love from these are the same dudes refusing the first subway to be built in Istanbul because it's haram to put living people underground like dead. And one of my personal favorites is not using guns because Muhammad wouldn't use gun swords or handibra. If guns were invented when Muhammad was alive, he would probably bomb the shit out of everyone. Oh, and the chicken farm thing where the Ottoman Sultan had the world's biggest ship army, fleet, but decided to turn it into a chicken farm because vast seas wouldn't help with anything. They missed the opportunity to explore the new continents thanks to this decision. If you look at the fall of the empire, it's full of hilarious stuff actually. Oh, I also love one of the laws they made to protect trading foreigners from local traders. The law required all citizens of Ottoman to pay more taxes and stuff compared to the foreigners, and also made it illegal to call foreigners the foreigners. Thomas Kapthu said. There was a time when TV was banned for being blasphemous as it replicated the creations of God. There was also a time when YouTube was banned in Pakistan because someone published a movie portraying Muhammad and YouTube refused to take it down, as it would have set a bad precedent for the future. Ironically enough, today all those Islamic preachers have YouTube channels which are modern-day televangelism, using clickbait titles and topics such as sexual relations and Islam to grab as much cash and views as they can. They even banned PUBG because of the season where players had to give offerings to in-game deities. There was even a ruling declaring everyone who played PUBG was no longer a Muslim and would have to be re-indoctrinated. Pakistan has banned TikTok as well for similar reasons. They expect the platform to control what its content creators put out, and that is beyond unreasonable. Samana Samirawarm said. Thomas Midgley Jr. Almost everything he invented has seriously harmed humanity. With his inventions, Thomas Midgley Jr. contributed to the poisoning of 3 generations of children, increased the risk of skin cancer and other skin problems related to exposure to UV rays, and contributed greatly to global warming. https://interest-engineering.com/thomas-midgley-jr-the-man-who-harmed-the-world-the-most. Alias said. Tell Ayan Asir, Nanny sends the following message. When you came, you said to me as follows, I will give Jamal Sin, when he comes, fine quality copper ingots. You left then, but you did not do what you promised me. You put ingots which were not good before my messenger, Sin, and said, if you want to take them, take them. If you do not want to take them, go away. What do you take me for, that you treat somebody like me with such contempt? I have sent as messengers gentlemen like ourselves to collect the bag with my money, deposited with you, but you have treated me with contempt by sending them back to me empty-handed several times, and that through enemy territory. Is there anyone among the merchants who trade with Telman who has treated me in this way? You alone treat my messenger with contempt. On account of that one, trifling, mina of silver which I owe you, you feel free to speak in such a way, while I have given to the palace on your behalf 1,080 pounds of copper, and Umiabum has likewise given 1,080 pounds of copper, apart from what we both have had written on a sealed tablet to be kept in the temple of Samus. How have you treated me for that copper? You have withheld my money bag from me in enemy territory. It is now up to you to restore my money to me in full. Take cognizance that, from now on, I will not accept here any copper from you that is not of fine quality. I shall, from now on, select and take the ingots individually in my own yard, and I shall exercise against you my right of rejection because you have treated me with contempt. Several Actuary 5960 said. I think I watched YouTube video or documentary on it recently. It was so interesting and also terrifying that one man can breed a bunch of unnecessary fear and hesitancy just because he wanted to make a profit. And his impact still goes on today 20 years later. /71 said. Digging up unrelated dirt on a true hero. Yeah, because here in the UK they just struck him off for no reason. Really shouldn't be needed, but ho-hum, it's the internet. He went to America to grift as he'd been struck off and he single-handedly managed to convince people that it was all a huge cover-up. It wasn't. He wouldn't have lost his license to practice medicine here otherwise. You've got to be really doing something wrong for that to happen. Other sanctions are available for them to use but they chose to stop him altogether. It's a shame so many Americans listen to him. Not just Americans. He spoke at a recent anti-vax rally on the big screen in London. That idiot nurse was there too. Alkalinarian said. He was the first person I thought of too. Quick rundown of his track record, putting lead into petrol and invented ozone-destroying CFCs. He had good intentions but oh boy did it not go well. Then the poor guy got polio, made his own pulley system to get in and out of bed, then one day managed to accidentally strangle himself to death with it. Pucupo said. Funnily I was just discussing him yesterday in another thread. Majlis inventions at the time were actually huge steps forward for safety. CFCs are horrible by today's standards, but look at what they replaced, ammonia and sulfur dioxide, two extremely toxic gases. At the time it was a wonderful non-toxic gas that didn't go kaboom, and many refrigerators at the time did go very kaboom. The interaction between CFCs and ozone wasn't discovered until 1974, with the ozone layer's actual function only being discovered the year before Freon's invention in 1928. The hazards of lead were known at the time, but engine knocking at the time was also a major issue. Lead was a small price to stop engines spontaneously traveling in all directions at once by retarding the ignition and preventing destructive effects. Now with modern engines, that isn't an issue anymore. Xerox 748 said. Had to scroll too far for this. With a new report out today on the climate crisis, it's only going to become more clear in the decades to come that this singe man did the greatest damage to humanity in its history and will arguably be responsible for the greatest number of its deaths. The majority of Americans believe that climate change is a hoax, cooked up by the liberals and the Chinese, as a direct result of this man's propaganda. Disgusting. General Sedgwick said. Yeah. I think he's the best example I've seen in this thread of someone who did a bunch of really shitty and influential things that fall outside the bounds of what might have happened anyways. Haven't come across Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Nixon, but I'd put them up there too. Like, Andrew Wakefield, vaccines cause autism guy, see above, was bad for the world, but anti-vax sentiment was a thing before he came around, and he just surfed a wave of stupidity and evil. Media consolidation and 21st century propaganda would probably still be a thing even if Murdoch never came along, but he sure gave it a good kick in the pants. Really, you could maybe replace Murdoch with Roger Ailes here. I think he was the real brains behind the operation, even if Murdoch was the $$ driving force. Also, Ailes was an influential advisor for Nixon, probably the most toxic political influence in the US until Trump, so, bonus points there. Hood Santa said. It's rumored that for many years, US launch codes were 0.0000000 inches, based on the reasoning that they'd need to be quickly and easily accessible. That 4chan guy probably guessed 12,345,678 or something stupid like that, because apparently it's too difficult to have certain trained military personnel remember launch codes when it should be literally their only job. Stephen Demon said. Your guess is unfortunately as good as mine. From what I understand, he was literally just fucking around on 4chan pretending to be a special agent. Went radio silent for 4 days and then, boom, headlines. It came across my newsfeed, And that's the only reason I even knew it happened. The conspiracy theorist deep in my skull says he already had them, but that's equally if not less likely than guessing it's so IDK. If any of it made sense, bro, it wouldn't be so stuck in my head. Frederick der Grossen said. Genghis Khan. While he personally didn't do much to hinder human progress, his reign began an era of Mongol expansionism and devastation, and his successors were responsible for the destruction of the House of Wisdom of Baghdad, ending the Islamic Golden Age, and not to mention the destruction of numerous cities and the deaths of many. Also, the Mongol Empire eventually paved the way for the Black Death. The empire led to many trade routes being formed between Europe and Asia, which eventually led to the transmission of the Black Death to Europe in the 14th century. Keypusher said. As terrible as the Black Death was, it was actually the primary driver of change that led Europe out of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. The Renaissance basically kickstarted modern civilization. The Black Death led to a great questioning of the old certainties. This led many, especially among the urban elite, to use reason to understand the world. The high mortality rate resulted in a drastic decline in the labor force. 7. Wages rose for both agricultural and urban workers. The survivors of the Black Death generally had a higher standard of living than before the plague. 8. This phenomenon occurred in both urban and rural areas. The crisis caused by the Black Death led to many changes in the economy in response to the fall in the population. Because of the labor shortages, there was a move from labor-intensive farming such as cereal to livestock and an increase in industry and agriculture, more labor-saving devices employed. In the period after the Black Death, an unprecedented amount of social mobility took place. Laborers became merchants, and merchants become members of the nobility. No longer was a person's destiny to be fixed by their birth. Previously, people assumed that one's station was fixed at one's birth and that one had to remain a member of the class you were born into. 24. People believed that a peasant would always be a peasant, an aristocrat, and an aristocrat. Italians, like other peoples, in Europe, believed that one's birth determined one's future and that this was determined by God. 25. However, as social mobility became more widespread because of the Black Death, many people believed that a person's merits or abilities were what mattered and not one's birth. https://daily-history.org/how_did_the_bubonic_the_Italian_Renaissance_possible. Marcus XL said. Not to defend the crimes of a conqueror like Genghis Khan, but some of this is biased historiography, and some of it is factually questionable. The trade routes formed by the Mongol Empire, especially Kublai Khan, also provided a huge impetus to European civilization, as well as the states between Yuan China and Europe. The Black Death was hardly a predictable consequences in that era, and didn't take place for a century after Genghis Khan's death. AskReddit 123 said. Genghis Khan. Bingo. The Hitler before Hitler, except far more successful. The enormous damage caused by this man spanned continents in centuries, and is felt up to this day. While he personally didn't do much to hinder human progress, I must have an even worse opinion of him than you, because I disagree with that statement, whether he intended to or not. It's funny reading all those comments glorifying the Pax Mongolia, saying there was peace in his age, a woman could ride alone from one border of the empire to the other, etc. Yeah, that's what you get when you genocide anything and everything in your way until there is no one left to resist. Any dictator is great by that measure, and the more brutal they are, the greater. Now, by itself, this isn't unique to the Mongols. Many empires brought peace at the point of the sword, from the Pax Romana before Mongols, to the Pax Britannia after, and such peace can be equally questioned from the moral perspective. But if we're measuring damage rather than only being good-evil, we need to look at the practical consequences rather than only individual-level morality, and this is where a stark contrast emerges. AskReddit 123 said. The Romans, as well as the Greeks, Mesopotamians such as Hammurabi, Islamic leaders such as Harun al-Rashid, brought some form of statesmanship and rule of law to the regions they conquered. Civic constructs, ideas, and institutions, which outlived the rulers and laid foundation to human progress that lasted long after their empires have crumbled. The Romans, for example, could be incredibly brutal. The crucifixion alone is one of the most horrifying punishments one can imagine. but they also brought about the ideas of citizens' rights, power sharing, checks and balances, rule of law and the right to trial, and other things we use even today. Hannibal, famously, couldn't recruit other Italian cities he liberated from Rome to join his cause, because even having been conquered, they preferred Rome's power-sharing terms and institutions over submitting to a foreign invader. The Mongols, wherever they went, pretty much did the opposite, destroy established societies and civic orders and replace them with tribal personal rule, where the word of the chief is law and you are at their personal whim. They would famously struggle governing regions such as China until their descendants, such as Kublai Khan, started himself adopting the customs of the nation he conquered, saying you can conquer China from horseback, but you can't govern it that way. AskReddit 123 said. But that was his descendants. At the time of Genghis, it was unmitigated chaos everywhere he went, above and beyond killing individual people. Wanton destruction of knowledge, collapse of entire civilizations, burning of libraries, and the erosion of civic institutions and principles we live by today which took centuries to rebuild, or were never rebuilt at all. Many conquerors, before and after Genghis, brought death and slavery to the people and nations they conquered. Few, if any, brought so little else. The Mongol invasions were the perfect storm of a tribal, chieftain-led society attacking a more advanced civilization, which happened often, but rarely succeeded on such scale, and an advanced civilization destroying a less powerful one, which also happened often, but without the associated long-lasting damage to civic institutions and generational knowledge. He may or may not have been personally more evil than other brutal tyrants before and after, but in terms of damage, Genghis Khan, a singular conqueror, caused as much damage to society as the entire Bronze Age collapse, a once-in-a-millennium event. Michigan Geezer said. Erich Ludendorff. He caused a lot of deaths in World War I, then formed Adolf Hitler into the charming fellow he was. Remember when Adolf was locked up and writing that idiotic book? He committed his crimes with the megalomaniac Ludendorff, who was spared the same jail time. Erich had a major hand in the deaths of 2 world wars. Farinder Ritter said. The guy you're referring to is Samuel Rowbotham, and his pseudoscience started back in the mid-1800s. However, modern flat earthers have only been a problem because of the internet and social media. But I don't think flat earth theory is causing additional damage to us as a species because, let's be honest, the people who buy into it were already pretty damaged in the first place. People who believe in at least one conspiracy theory are overwhelmingly likely to believe in several different ones at the same time. So if they didn't believe in a flat earth, they'd just believe in something else equally absurd. Atchis page 56 said. While Tesla was a good engineer and made some significant contributions in his field, he was not some genius who was ahead of his time that some internet cultists like to believe. He lacked the background of rigorous scientific methods and refused to accept modern physics. One of the reasons why many of his inventions didn't work out is because they couldn't, because of his misconceptions about how laws of physics work. Gorf the Magnificent said. During the election of 1916, he promised he wouldn't enter World War I then, almost immediately after he was elected. In April 1917 he did. Continued to serve as president after he had a debilitating stroke. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, he systematically removed black people from their jobs in the federal government. Other than that, he totally deserves the ranking that political science professors nationwide have given him as one of America's best presidents. By the way, before becoming president, Wilson was a political science professor. Mike Laushi said. Mao. Without question. I weep for the lost potential to the entire world because of what he, and his party who are still in power, has done and continue to do. The most populous nation on Earth, 1.4 billion people, have been twisted into a shameful echo of what we all know they could be. Think of the advancements and innovations which could have come from China over the last 70 years but haven't, precisely because of Mao and the actions of his party. As long as the CCP remain in power, those innovations never will come either. The society and education system which has been engineered to control the people and keep the party in power strips the people of any desire, or incentive, to create, innovate, think critically, or question their human condition, as religion and spirituality has also been trampled on along with freedom of thought and free expression. We cope with it because it is hard to conceptualize this loss, as we haven't technically lost anything. Rather, we, as a species, have been denied the benefits of having 1.4 billion more free-thinking, critical, questioning, exploring souls inhabiting the world. Instead, we have parrots and sheep whose only advancements come through stealing others' work. I don't even like to try to seriously imagine how much more advanced as a species in all areas, moral, spiritual, and technological, we would be if the Chinese had not been turned into what they are now, as it just makes me sad when I do. Citation N7v11c said, "The Roman Catholic Church choked out scientific discovery for hundreds of years." No, they didn't. That little myth stems from anti-Catholic attitudes. Looking at you Protestant England, especially those in the US, were no innocents here, up to and including the early 20th century as a result of the waves of Irish and Italian immigrants throughout the years. The Catholic Church came down hard on people who were vehemently criticizing their leadership. Not purely for their scientific research. Advancement is not an exponential curve. It relies on numerous secondary and even tertiary discoveries technologies. For example, let's say you tried to build a brand new Boeing 747 in 1935. I'll even give you the blueprints when you hop back in this theoretical time machine for a head start. In 5 years could you get it built? No way in hell. 10 years? Maybe. Why is that? Because you don't know what the hell you're doing. You don't know the metallurgical composition of the fan blades and the turbofan engines, and no one in 1935 knows what the hell one of those even is, as the first one ran as a testbed in 1943. No one around you could build a CRT television that could fit in the cockpit that even somewhat resembles an electronic gauge. The fly-by-wire system alone would confound the best electrical engineer of the day. You just couldn't do it without so much other knowledge gained by experience and sharing ideas. We would be right where we are now even if somehow the Catholic Church had burned anyone able to add 2 plus 2 correctly. Freecorp said, "Targeted racism and disenfranchisement of the poor, ignoring the HIV/AIDS crisis, closing asylums and leaving a gigantic number of mentally ill disabled people on the streets, the war on drugs, claiming more than once to people to have been at a concentration camp overseas when it was liberated." I could go on. So many personal moral failures. So many political moral failures, so much terrible legislation that we're still dealing with it today and will likely be for several generations. Cedar Wolf said, "It was a large archive of ancient scrolls and literature. A lot of the things that were there were copies of other things, so not everything was lost, but if the library and the mouse eye on it was a part of it had somehow managed to survive, then all of those texts would be maintained in one place and they would be easy to reference instead of having to track them down and scattered across the centuries. Not only that, but they would have been original editions. Ptolemy II founded the Library of Alexandria, and if you arrived in port for trade, and you had books on your ship, the authorities would confiscate your books, have the scribes at the library meticulously copy them, and then you would get the copies back. The library kept the originals as a donation. In this way, they got books from all over the Mediterranean and all of the surrounding empires. For example, you've heard of the works of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey? Those are some pretty definitive and iconic stories, right? Well, they're only 2 pieces of an 8 or 9-piece series. Homer didn't actually write them, he just collected the stories from existing legends and wrote them down. Either way, finding those lost 6 or 7 volumes would be the literary equivalent of opening King Tut's tomb. The Library of Alexandria not only had full copies of all of Homer's works, they also had translations and copies that had discussion, analysis, cultural notes, and criticism done by some of the best scholars of the day. And that's just one example. Not a Bucket said, "Basically, this. We could have been millennia ahead of where we are now. Redstone would be so advanced now. But in actuality, there were basically anything you could find in an actual library. Except this library was the most vast in the world and was dedicated to the preservation of knowledge. Since things were not so easily written down and copied during the Bronze Age, the Library of Alexandria held lots of knowledge that had been lost in other parts of the world. The burning of the library also meant the burning of historical texts, advanced techniques of anything, and the loss of knowledge on a large scale that may have sent humanity back a few centuries." J. the Ford Man said, "He is ultimately responsible for the transatlantic slave trade, which disrupted civilizations and brutalized human beings. The transatlantic slave trade was actually small fry compared to the greater slave trade that was being carried out across the world, particularly by the Arabs, who arguably have been going at it for far longer and with far more people than the Europeans ever did. Terpsichorean Wombat said, "Roll with me a minute, because it was unintentional, but Charles Darwin. His theory was followed by a deluge of terrible, dangerous, and vicious pseudoscience that generally boil down, one way or another, to people who don't look, think, act like me or less evolved savages whom I don't need to treat like real people. If you look back at thinkers like Lombroso or Nordau, you can trace the lines from Darwin straight through to the eugenics movement, and racists and imperialists everywhere were quick to cry evolution when they meant we want these people's lands, money, lives, labor. It's particularly creepy in a book like Max Nordau's Degeneration, as he explains blandly that the victims of degeneration will argue that they aren't degenerate, but no one needs to listen to their explanations because they're just symptoms of their dangerously diseased brains. You can practically hear the Nazi jackboots marching in the background, and the man is Jewish. He's using the line of logic that in 50 years will result in the Holocaust. Then, of course, there's social Darwinism, which at its worst and most self-serving turned into if you're poor and dying, that's a needed culling that will make our economy and society stronger. Darwin, to be clear, didn't create these offshoots of his theory, and of course humans have been finding ways to decide that other people don't count as people for as long as we've had humans. However, Darwin's ideas were quickly seized and used as the implicit or explicit underpinning of over a century of justifications for every kind of exploitation and bloodshed. Carl Sagan said, "I wouldn't say those are a very fair, accurate comparison. Child porn could and, I guarantee was, distributed without the internet just fine. Henry Ford didn't invent the car. He just revolutionized mass manufacturing. Also, drive-bys are a product of guns, which if you could pin the invention of firearms to a single person, an accurate comparison could be made." Darwin's theories gave way to a new style of pseudoscientific justification for horrible theories like phrenology and other eugenics programs. His work revolutionized biology as it offered a way to justify success of a species. A good comparison is indirectly blaming Freud for the creation of modern psychology. Psychology is a very new field of study that has had many horrible blunders resulting from it. The problem is not psychology itself, rather people's willing acceptance of theories that aim to explain something as complex as the human mind but don't properly adhere to the scientific method. Metal Acid said, "Mao. The guy outweighs every other world leader in body count. This MF should be the metric of evil. We're losing our shit over a few 100,000 dead over a virus in the US. That's not even a drop in the bucket compared to the fucking mountains of bodies Mao stacked up. Our little brains don't even have the capacity to elicit an emotional response when we are told tens of millions of people starved to death under Mao. Jesus fuck man, we cry foul when some racist gets caught on camera, but when you look at real damage done to humanity and we can't even shed a tear for all these people lost." Splittiplus said, "Take an upvote buddy, but you need to sell the stats. Responsible for leaded gasoline. It's hard to estimate the number of direct deaths it caused, but could be guessed to be around 100 million. I don't even know how to capture all the indirect deaths it caused when it made most of the population stupid and violent for a few decades. Also responsible for CFC, Freon. Not only does it deplete the ozone layer, subjecting us all to harsher UV radiation damage which gives a lot of people cancer, it also acts as a greenhouse gas, and amplifies the effects of CO2 as a greenhouse gas. Considering we have probably fucked the planet with global warming, the death counter on his contribution here is still rolling up and is likely to hit the high score.